Brighton is famous for fish and chips, sunny beaches, and summer holidays. But when the sun goes down, a very dark history comes to life. Long before tourists arrived, Brighton was a small, poor fishing village called Brighthelmstone. The town grew rapidly in the 1700s and 1800s when wealthy people, including royalty, came to enjoy the sea air. This sudden change from a quiet village to a fashionable resort created deep social divides, tragic accidents, and brutal crimes. Many of the city's modern shops and hotels were built directly on top of old cellars, hidden tunnels, and ancient graves, leaving behind a long trail of ghosts that still haunt the coast today. Our first stop is right on the water. Look out at the ocean and you'll see the eerie skeleton of the ruined West Pier. It opened in 1866 but was destroyed by a massive fire in 2003. People walking the beach at night claim they can still smell wet smoke and burning wood. But that's not the scariest part. Witnesses often see the pale, shivering ghost of a young girl in ripped clothes wandering the beach. She is believed to be the spirit of a homeless teenager who died of a drug overdose in the 1980s. Her ghost walks out toward the sea and vanishes into the ruined pier frame. If you walk across the Old Steine, you might hear locals whisper about the Sightless Spectre. According to legend, this is the ghost of John Robinson, an 18th century soldier for hire. The story goes that he rescued people from the French Revolution, but later ended up on the wrong side of a war in Persia. There, his enemies captured him and burned his eyes out with hot irons. He eventually made his way back to Brighton and died on the grass in 1799. The stories of his ghost are truly gross. In the 1950s, a police officer went to help what he thought was a drunk man in the road, only to throw up in horror when the figure turned around to reveal a decaying face with maggot-filled, empty eye sockets. Years later, in 1969, a woman waiting outside the theatre sat next to a solid eyeless figure and ended up in the hospital from pure shock. But here is the twist. None of it is actually true. Historians have checked the records and found that John Robinson never went to Persia or fought in France. This action-packed tale is actually a brilliant piece of local folklore, likely inspired by fictional characters like the Scarlet Pimpernel. Further along the Steine stands Steine House, built in 1804 for Prince George, who became King George IV, and his secret wife, Maria Fitzherbert. They were forced to keep their relationship a secret, so they built a hidden tunnel connecting Steine House to the Royal Pavilion so they could meet in private. In 2008 and 2009, staff at the building reported seeing the spirit of a woman in a long flowing dress that matched Maria's description, along with a strong male presence believed to be Prince George. It is said they were so happy in the house that their spirits appear to refuse to leave. Now we are heading into the lanes. These tight, winding brick alleys are the oldest part of the city, and they are packed with ghosts. The most famous spirit in the lanes is the Blue Nun, who haunts Meeting House Lane. Legend says that in the 12th century, a young nun from St. Bartholomew's Priory fell in love with a soldier who was sent to protect the area from pirates. The two ran away together, but they were quickly captured. The soldier was hanged, and the nun was locked inside a brick wall in the Priory cellars and left to die. She is called the Blue Nun because of her blue glow and choked blue face, which shows her final moments of suffocation. Beware, because local legend warns that looking directly into her face will bring a sudden, untimely end to the witness's life. In Nile Street, which sits on the old site of St. Bartholomew's Chapel, another hooded monk is often seen slipping into solid brick walls. If you want to grab a drink in the lanes around Brighton, remember to choose your pub carefully. The Marlborough Pub and Theatre holds a particularly dark Victorian secret. A former landlord was convicted of pushing his wife down the stairs. She did not die right away, so he carried her injured body to the cellar and left her in agony for hours until she passed away. Ever since, strange things have happened on the stairs and in the cellar. Disembodied screams are heard, and the woman is said to have appeared on stage in the middle of some performances, hovering in mid-air. The building has had 6 separate exorcisms, but it has not done any good. The nearby Druid's Head pub, built in the 16th century, is famous for its poltergeist activity. Staff have seen glasses slide on their own across the bar, bottles fly off shelves, and mirrors fog up without any clear reason. The ghost of a hooded monk has been spotted near the staircase, and men using the downstairs toilets have reported seeing a dark figure reflected in the mirror, only to find the room empty when they turn around. Another ghostly presence has been reported, a woman in a red dress, seen on one occasion near the main bar. Then, on the 31st of October 2015, a picture frame suddenly flew off a pillar, striking a customer on the back. No one was injured, and the frame remained intact. Such unexplained events have cemented the Druid's Head's reputation as a hub of paranormal activity in Brighton. At the Cricketers Pub, first built in 1547, the original landlord, Derek Carver, was burned as a heretic for his religious beliefs. However, the pub's most famous ghost is tied to a much later period. In 1888, a man named Robert Donston Stevenson, who is a famous suspect in the Jack the Ripper murders, lived at the pub. Many believe he fled London to escape being caught, and his angry ghost is said to still haunt the building. Interestingly, staff and guests report that his spirit only appears to women in the upstairs rooms. Other pubs in the lanes have similar stories. The Pump House is haunted by a woman dressed in black who stands at the bar before fading away, and people often hear footsteps and voices in the cellar. The Mash Tun is haunted by a former landlady from the First World War. At the southern end of the lanes, a building once used as a fishing tackle shop in the mid-19th century, and later the Northern Lights Bar, has its own strange history. In 2008, after a late-night opening party, the owners heard heavy, slow footsteps climbing the wooden stairs around 3 a.m. They were terrified because they knew they were the only ones left in the building. A spiritual meeting held in 2009 revealed a 19th century gentleman with a walking cane and a young girl living in the cellar, both of whom are believed to still haunt the property. Brighton Town Hall was built in the 1830s on top of the old gardens of St. Bartholomew's Priory. The basement of the building served as the town's police cells until the 1960s. The most famous ghost here is Henry Solomon, the first sole chief constable of Brighton, appointed in 1838. Because the local police force was very small, Solomon was highly involved in day-to-day policing. On the evening of March 13, 1844, a 23-year-old carpet thief named John Lawrence was brought to Solomon's basement office for questioning. Lawrence was highly distressed. Seeking to calm the young man, Solomon let him sit by the fire. When Solomon turned away, Lawrence grabbed the heavy iron fireplace poker and struck Solomon on the side of the head with immense force. The blow was so hard that it bent the iron poker. Solomon was taken to his home on Princes Street, where he died the next morning, leaving behind a widow and 9 children. John Lawrence was tried at Lewes, found guilty in just 12 minutes, and became the last person publicly hanged at Horsham Prison in April 1844. Ever since the murder, a tall, dark shadow believed to be Solomon's ghost has been seen walking through the basement corridors. Our next stop is Regency Square, built near the seafront, and was once home to the upper classes. The buildings here have some of the most detailed ghost sightings in Brighton, showing how the lives of past residents and servants still linger. In 2006, a tenant named Simon lived on the top floor of flat 65, which used to be the servants' quarters. Every night, Simon would wake up feeling that someone was watching him sleep. He would also feel someone poke his ankle to wake him. Tired of being woken up, he spoke out loud and asked the ghost to leave him alone so he could sleep. One night, Simon got up to use the bathroom. He opened his bedroom door and saw the ghost of a young maid in a black dress and white bonnet. She darted past him and ran into the kitchen. His flatmate Sarah also felt watched, and one night, a heavy glass water jug next to her bed split perfectly in half with a loud bang, which she believed was the maid's way of getting attention. At the Regency Tavern, a barman named Mr. Smiles was working alone in the cellar with the beer lines when he felt a freezing presence. Looking up, he saw a glowing woman wearing an old-fashioned dress who gave off a strange green light. As she floated toward him, he froze in fear, describing the feeling as slivers of ice passing through his body. Other ghosts at the tavern include the cobbler's daughter, a disabled girl who was locked in her room as punishment. Smelling gas and panicking that she would suffocate, she jumped out of the window to her death. Her ghost is still seen at the window or rolling in a wheelchair toward a bricked-up wall before vanishing. Additionally, the spirit of Mrs. Edlin, the pub's first landlady who ran the business from 1894 to 1902, is said to appear in the pub to check that standards are being kept up. The pub also experienced a sad loss in the 1990s when the landlady, Mrs. Penfold, died of a sudden heart attack after football hooligans smashed the pub's front windows. At the nearby Regency Hotel, a slim, grey-haired lady walks silently through walls. In 2006, a photographer named Anna Pierce felt this presence in the early hours of the morning before her bed began to shake violently. Long before these buildings were constructed, the area was known as Bellevue Field. In the 18th century, people walking across the field at night were terrified of Bedlam Betsy, a ghost with a twisted mad face and staring eyes who would jump out of the dark shadows to scare travellers. Preston Manor, built in 1738 by Lord Thomas Weston, and eventually passed to the Stanford family, one of the wealthiest families in Sussex. It is widely considered one of the most haunted houses in Britain. The most famous ghost is the White Lady, first seen in the 16th century. In October or November 1896, a resident named Lily MacDonald was in the drawing room when a ghost with loose golden hair and a white dress walked toward her. Lily followed the spirit through the billiard room to the stairs and tried to grab her, but Lily's arms went straight through the empty air as the ghost vanished. During a spiritual meeting held in the Cleves Room that same year, a medium named Ada Goodrich Freer claimed the ghost was a nun named Sister Agnes, who had been kicked out of the church in 1535 and buried in unholy ground outside the house. In 1897, workmen clearing drains under the South Terrace found the skeleton of a 50-year-old woman that was around 400 years old. The local vicar refused to bury her because she was Catholic, so she was buried secretly at the edge of the churchyard. Sighting reports dropped after this, though the White Lady is still occasionally seen. The Theatre Royal on New Road opened in the 1800s and is haunted by its own Grey Lady, believed by many to be Elizabeth Nye Chart, who ran the theatre successfully from 1876 to 1892. In 1960, the theatre's manager, Melville Gilliam, spotted her backstage. 10 years later, another manager named Jack Keats saw her in dressing room 1 and thought she looked like the famous French actress Sarah Bernhardt, who had injured her knee there in 1894. In 1976, a bar manager named Joy Murter saw a woman in a grey chiffon dress in the empty bar. The spirit smiled sweetly and vanished. In August 1982, wardrobe mistress Anne Flood was in the laundry when she felt something pushing against a banging door. She opened it to find a woman with silver hair and a grey veil who floated past her. During the 1980s, 2 overnight sound technicians saw her sitting up in the highest gallery seats, known as the Gods. The famous performer Danny LaRue also believed the ghost was real after finding his stage wigs moved around inside his locked dressing room in the mid-1980s. Further outside the city centre, the Hangleton area holds a much older terror. In the past, this area was home to large gallows and gibbets, where the bodies of executed criminals were hung up in iron cages and left to rot as a warning. This attracted massive flocks of crows, ravens and magpies, which would feast on the remains. Today, the area still has an unusually large number of these birds. More terrifyingly, the ghost of the Hangleton hangman is frequently seen walking along Hangleton Road. He is described as a tall, broad man in dirty, tattered clothes, wearing a dark executioner's hood and carrying a hangman's noose. Near St. Anne's Wells, a different kind of horror has been reported. Local legends describe encounters with demonic children who have terrifying, cat-like eyes. Paranormal researchers have suggested that the site is actually a hellmouth, which acts as a direct gateway between our world and the spirit world. The ghost stories of Brighton show how the transition of the city from a simple fishing village to a flashy resort left deep scars on the local people. The spirits of bricked-up nuns, murdered police chiefs, and forgotten servants are tied directly to real historical events and places. By exploring these tales, we see a darker side to the seaside town, where the ghosts of the past still refuse to be forgotten. Thank you for watching, and remember, sleep well, but keep one eye open, as you never know who is watching from the shadows. Good night.